The sky above was not blue. It was red and burning like fire. Clouds were made of ash, and thunder rumbled like growls of hungry beasts. Trees in the jungle twisted like snakes, and the air was hot like boiling water. This was not Earth. This was XARN-5, a deadly alien planet full of danger. No human should be walking here. But he was. His name was Jace, a scout from the Earth Alliance. He had been sent alone to search for signs of life or lost tech. He moved carefully, his boots crunching over strange red soil. Suddenly, a sharp sound echoed through the jungle. A scream. Not a beast's scream, but a girl's voice. Loud and angry, Jace ran toward the sound, pushing past thorny plants that hissed at him. He reached a clearing and froze. 3 tall lizard-like aliens with spears had cornered someone. She looked young, maybe his age, with deep violet skin and silver hair. Her back was to a rock, her eyes wild but fearless. One of the lizard creatures lunged at her. But before it could strike, Jace raised his plasma rifle and fired. The beam hit the ground near them, sending smoke and fire into the air. The lizard creatures turned, hissed, then vanished into the jungle. Jace lowered his rifle and stepped closer. "You okay?" he asked, breathing hard. The alien girl didn't thank him. Instead, she glared at him with glowing green eyes. "I didn't need protection," she snapped, her voice sharp like a blade. Jace blinked, surprised. "You were about to get stabbed," he said. "I had it under control," she growled, crossing her arms. Her clothes were torn, and her arms had bruises. But her voice was strong, and she stood tall like a warrior. Before Jace could say more, the ground shook slightly. Then, from above, a deep screech came loud and full of rage. Jace looked up, and his blood froze. A giant flying creature with burning wings circled above them. Its eyes glowed like fire, and its mouth dripped with green acid. The girl also looked up, and for the first time, her face changed. She looked scared. She looked scared, truly scared. Without a word, she jumped onto Jace's back. Her arms wrapped around his neck, and her legs locked around his waist. "Run," she whispered harshly, her voice shaking. Jace didn't ask questions. He ran fast, boots pounding the ground as the monster screamed again. Trees exploded behind them as the beast dived low. Fire spread through the leaves, and smoke filled the air. Jace coughed, but kept running, dodging roots and flames. "Why is it chasing us?" he shouted. "It's not chasing us," she said into his ear. "It's chasing me." Jace's mind raced as he jumped over a fallen log. "Who are you?" he asked, his voice filled with confusion. "No time," she said. "Just keep going." They reached a rocky path that led down into a narrow cave. Jace didn't stop. He ran straight in. The heat from the fire beast faded as they moved deeper underground. When they finally stopped, both of them were panting. She slid off his back and leaned against the cave wall. "You're heavier than you look," Jace said, trying to catch his breath. "You're slower than I thought," she replied, still angry, but there was a small smile hiding behind her words. Jace sat down and looked at her carefully. "You got a name?" he asked. She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "Riven?" "Okay, Riven, I'm Jace." She looked at him, then looked away. "I didn't ask," she said quietly. Jace laughed, just a little. He was starting to like her, even if she was full of fire, but deep inside, he knew something was wrong. Why had the lizard creatures attacked her? Why did the fire beast follow only her? And why had she been alone in such a dangerous place? Jace watched her closely as she stared at the cave wall. There were secrets in her eyes, secrets she didn't want to share. But he had a feeling, whatever those secrets were, they could change everything. Outside the cave, the fire beast roared again. And deep in the dark, something else moved, something watching them both. The jungle was not done with them yet. A loud rumble shook the cave walls. Like thunder waking from sleep, dust fell from the ceiling, and small stones rolled down near their feet. Jace looked up, his eyes wide. "That thing is still out there," he whispered. Riven said nothing, but her hands were shaking, just a little, without warning. The cave lit up red, an orange light pouring in from the entrance. The fire beast had landed just outside, its wings folded like burning curtains. Its claws scratching the ground. Jace grabbed his rifle, but Riven grabbed his arm. "No," she whispered. "Weapons make it angrier." Jace stared at her, confused. "How do you know that?" She didn't answer. Instead, she pulled a small silver stone from her pocket. It was shaped like a triangle, glowing faintly blue. She placed the stone on the ground and touched it with her finger. The air around them shimmered for a second, and the heat seemed to fade. "What did you just do?" Jace asked, watching carefully. "I made us disappear," she said, still whispering. The fire beast roared again, but didn't enter the cave. It sniffed the air, confused, then took off into the sky. Its huge wings pushed flames across the jungle. When the sound of it finally faded, Riven relaxed. Jace didn't. "Okay?" "That was not normal," he said. "That stone, that creature, this whole place." Riven stood up, brushing dust from her legs. "I told you, I don't need protection," she muttered. Jace stood too, now angry. "You were clinging to me like a scared cat," he said. She turned sharply toward him. "I didn't ask for help," she said. "And I didn't ask you to follow me." "You didn't have to," Jace said. "That thing was going to roast you." They stared at each other, both breathing hard, but under her anger. Jace saw something else, fear, not of the fire beast, but of herself. She turned away from him and walked deeper into the cave. Jace followed, even though she didn't ask him to. The path grew tighter, and the air was cooler. They walked in silence for a while. Then Jace spoke softly. "Why was that thing chasing you?" She didn't stop walking, but her voice came out, quiet and cold. "Because I'm not supposed to be here." He frowned. "You mean, on this planet?" "No," she said. "I mean, alive." The words hit him like ice water. Jace stopped, staring at her back. She kept walking, her voice steady but low. "My people left me for dead. They said I was weak, a mistake." "Why?" Jace asked. Almost afraid to know, Riven turned around now, her eyes glowing faint green in the dark. "Because I was born with this," she said, holding up the blue triangle stone. "It's a tracker, a signal, a curse." Jace stared at it. "Who's tracking you?" "Everyone," she said. And suddenly, the cave shook again. But this time, it wasn't the fire beast. Small buzzing noises filled the air. Dozens of glowing red eyes appeared in the shadows. Jace raised his weapon. Riven pulled out a thin stick from her belt, more like a conductor's baton than a weapon. The buzzing grew louder. The eyes moved closer. Metal drones, spider-shaped, dropped from the walls. Jace fired once and missed. "They're not here for you," Riven shouted. The drones ignored Jace completely, moving only toward her. She struck the ground with her baton and shouted in her own alien language. A wave of energy burst from her feet, pushing the drones back. Jace watched in shock as she glowed brighter and brighter. The drones regrouped. Now faster, now angry. "They won't stop," she said, breathing hard. "Why? What do they want?" Jace asked. She looked at him with wide, tired eyes. "They want what's inside me." Jace didn't know what that meant, but it sounded bad. He grabbed her hand. "Then let's get out of here," he said. They ran. Together this time, deeper into the cave. The drones followed, crawling like nightmares through the stone corridors. And all the while, Jace had one thought in his mind. He had stepped into something far bigger than a scouting mission. This girl was not just an exile. She was a target, a secret, and maybe something more. He didn't know what was coming next, but he knew one thing: he couldn't leave her now, not after what he'd seen. The moment they stepped out of the cave, the silence hit them harder than the heat. No birds, no beasts, no wind, no life. It felt like the world had stopped breathing. Jace looked around and felt the hair on his neck rise. Everything was too still. Too quiet, like the jungle was waiting. Riven didn't speak, her eyes scanning the trees. She didn't blink, didn't move fast, just slow and careful, like she had done this before. Jace whispered, "Why does it feel like we're being watched?" Riven nodded slowly. "Because we are," she said. "This part of the jungle listens." They moved forward step by step. The trees here were tall and smooth, with black bark and no leaves. No branches reached out, no roots above ground. It was like walking through a graveyard of trees. Each one looked the same, dead, but not really. "Don't speak unless I say so," Riven warned. Jace frowned, but nodded. Then he noticed something strange. The air felt thick, like it was pressing against his ears, and each step he took echoed in his chest. Not in his ears. The jungle wasn't just watching, it was listening inside them. A sudden crack in the distance made them both freeze. It wasn't a loud sound, just a twig snapping, but in this jungle, even a whisper could bring death. Riven raised her baton again. This time, holding it close to her mouth, she made a soft, rhythmic sound, like a coated whistle. A second later, the pressure in the air shifted. The jungle responded with a low hum, almost like it was purring. Jace watched, amazed and confused. "What was that?" he mouthed silently. Riven replied with only a glance. After a few more minutes of walking, they reached a large clearing. At the center was a stone structure half buried in moss and vines. It looked old, very old, like it had been there for thousands of years. Strange symbols covered the walls, glowing faintly as they approached. Riven's eyes widened. "This place," she whispered under her breath. "I've seen it before in dreams." Jace looked around, feeling the air turn cold despite the heat. Suddenly, one of the glowing symbols shifted. It turned into a shape, 2 circles and a line, and then it spoke, not in a loud voice, but a whisper inside Jace's skull. "Riven," it said, "you returned too early." Jace staggered back. Shocked, he looked at her, expecting her to panic, but she just stared at the wall. "I didn't mean to come," she whispered back to it. The wall responded with a pulse of blue light. "You carry the signal, the jungle knows." Jace stepped forward now, trying to understand, "What is this place?" he asked, forgetting her warning. The jungle heard his voice, and it did not like it, instantly. Vines snapped from the ground like snakes. They wrapped around Jace's legs and arms, pulling him toward the ground. He struggled, but the more he fought, the tighter they became. Riven screamed his name, but didn't move yet. She reached into her pack and pulled out another silver stone. This one cracked. She crushed it in her hand, and a sharp wind blew through the clearing. The vines hissed and pulled away. Jace fell to his knees, coughing. Riven ran to him and helped him up. "I told you not to speak," she said, angry but also scared. Jace looked at her, breathing hard. "That wall, how did it know your name?" Riven looked down. "Because this place was built by my ancestors," she said, "and they thought I'd never return." Jace stared at her, trying to connect the pieces. "You're not just from some tribe, Quo," he said. "You're linked to this world." Riven nodded slowly. "My family used to rule this region. Long ago, before the machines came, they used the jungle to control others," she continued, "and when I was born with the mark, they feared I'd repeat history." The mark, Jace realized, was the stone she carried, not just a tracker, but a key. A symbol of power hidden in her blood. The wall pulsed again, and this time, it spoke in both their minds. "Your return means the machine masters will rise again." Riven's face paled. "No," she whispered. "That's not why I'm here." Jace stepped in front of her. "I don't care what you are," he said. You saved me, and I'm staying with you. Suddenly, a loud sound cracked through the trees. Something large was crashing toward the clearing. Riven's eyes widened. They're coming, she said, and they'll destroy everything to stop me. Jace gripped his weapon, then we stop them first, and behind them? The jungle whispered once more, not in warning, but in hunger. The sky was green now, not from nature, but from smoke rising in spirals. Flashes of light blinked between the trees, distant but moving closer. Jace tightened the strap on his rifle while Riven checked the edge of her broken blade. They said nothing. But both felt the same truth. Something powerful had found their trail. They had left the jungle's listening zone behind. Now they walked through old paths covered in metal vines and rusted machines. The air buzzed with static, and the ground sometimes sparked where they stepped. This place didn't breathe like the jungle. It groaned like something dying slowly. Riven stopped near a tree fused with old human tech. There was a metal plate bolted into the bark. Blinking faintly, she pressed her hand on it. And a low tone echoed. Jace stared, confused. What is this place? She didn't look at him as she answered. An old human outpost, she said. Before they left and locked the gates behind them, Jace stepped closer and looked around. There were structures made of steel and black glass, half buried under soil. Some still had names printed on them in English. Sector Gamma, Relay Point 6. Observation Wing. We were here, he whispered. Humans were here long ago. Riven turned to him, her voice quieter now. They came searching for resources. She said, but they found something else. She pointed to a broken tower in the distance. They found what lived beneath, and they didn't know how to leave it alone before Jace could ask. A faint scream pierced the air. Not close. Not far, but filled with pain. He raised his weapon and scanned the area. Another scream followed, this time sharper. Riven's eyes narrowed. That's not a beast. She said, that's someone calling for help, without waiting. She ran toward the sound. Jace followed, branches slapping his face as they pushed through the ruins. They reached a sunken hallway buried halfway into the ground. The scream came again, now clearly a voice. Jace jumped down first and aimed his rifle into the dark. A figure huddled in the corner, a man, maybe early 40s, his uniform torn and face bleeding. His eyes locked onto Jace's armor, and he cried out, "Human, thank God. Help me." Jace knelt beside him, checking his injuries. "Who are you?" The man looked terrified. Glancing at Riven with shaky eyes, "Mercenary Unit 3, he said. "We were hired to find her." He pointed a trembling finger at Riven. "She's the key." The one with the stone. Riven's expression turned cold. "You were tracking me." She said, "Not a question." The man nodded, then grabbed Jace's hand. "We didn't know she was dangerous," he said. "But they do, the ones who paid us." Jace stood slowly, his face hard. "Who paid you?" The man opened his mouth. But then his eyes went wide. From behind the wall, a shadow moved. And then a sharp claw burst through his chest. Blood sprayed, and the man collapsed in silence. A tall machine stepped out of the dark, smooth metal and red lights for eyes. Its head turned toward Jace and Riven, calculating. Jace fired first. Bullets bouncing off its armor. Riven moved quickly, slashing with her blade at its joints. It grabbed her arm, but she flipped back and stabbed its eye socket. The machine sparked and fell. But more shadows appeared in the hallway behind it. They didn't have time to count. They just ran through broken halls, across rotting floors, and out into the open again. Jace gasped for air, his chest burning. Riven dropped to her knees. Gripping her arm, he helped her up and pulled her into a side tunnel under a collapsed walkway. They hid there, in silence. While the machines searched above, Riven didn't speak for a long time. When she finally did, her voice was low, like a secret she didn't want to say. "They weren't just after me," she whispered. "They were after what I carry in my blood." Jace frowned. "What's in your blood?" She looked at him, her eyes glowing faintly in the dark. "Memory," she said. "The memory of those who ruled this world before even your kind arrived." Jace felt a chill run down his spine. This wasn't just about survival anymore. It was about history and power that should have stayed buried. Somewhere above, a machine clicked as it scanned the rocks. Its red lights swept past the tunnel's edge, but didn't stop. For now, they were safe. But Jace knew the hunt had changed, and whoever was behind this wanted more than just Riven. They wanted to control the past and rewrite the future. The tunnel felt colder than before, like the air itself had stopped trusting them. Riven sat against the cracked stone wall, her hands trembling, but her face still sharp. Jace stared at the spot where the mercenary had died, the blood still fresh. In his mind, he wanted answers not just about Riven, but about the people who sent that man to track her. "I need to know everything," he said quietly. Riven didn't respond, not at first. She touched the mark on her wrist, the faint glow beneath her skin pulsing like a heartbeat. Then she looked at him, not angry, not cold, just tired. "I wasn't supposed to survive," she whispered, "not after what I saw." Jace leaned closer, not interrupting. She began to speak, her voice flat but heavy. "When I was a child, my people trusted the wrong species." She said, "Humans, yes, but also other outsiders. They came to study, to help," they said, "but they wanted our tech, our old ways." My father led the trade, gave them what they asked for, in return for weapons and power. Jace could feel something rising in his chest, guilt. Confusion, maybe both. Riven continued, "But one day, I touched something I shouldn't have. A core, an ancient piece buried deep in the valley. It showed me things, memories, wars, the truth of what we used to be. When I told my father, he ordered the elders to silence me." She stopped for a moment, closing her eyes. "They locked me in a chamber," she said. "Told the others I ran away, but I escaped. With help from someone I never saw again." Jace was about to speak when they heard footsteps above, slow, heavy, unnatural. They both froze. The sound echoed like metal scraping on bone. Then a voice called out, filtered and calm, "Riven of the Atari bloodline." It said, "You are requested for collection." Jace cursed under his breath and grabbed his rifle. He peeked outside the tunnel, and what he saw made his pulse spike. Not a machine this time, but a man, tall, armored in black, a visor hiding his face. Next to him were 4 bots, all humming with energy. Riven stood quickly. "We have to run," she said, but Jace didn't move. His eyes were locked on the man in the armor. There was something familiar about the way he stood. Then the voice came again. This time more personal. "You too, Jace Carter," it said. "Your debt has come due." Jace's breath caught in his throat. "How does he know my name?" he whispered. Riven pulled his arm, but he still didn't move. Then the man in black removed his helmet. Jace's eyes widened in disbelief. It was his old commanding officer, Captain Rhodes, a man who'd been declared missing during the XARN-5 operation 5 years ago. But he didn't look missing. He looked enhanced, colder, stronger, changed. "You joined them," Jace muttered. "Why?" Rhodes stepped forward, his voice calm. "Because survival needs control," he said. "And she is the key to controlling Zarn-5. You saw it yourself. She can speak to the jungle. Open lost tech, awaken the past." Riven's fists clenched. "You sold yourself to the syndicate," she growled. "You're not a soldier anymore." "I'm more than that now," Rhodes replied. "And you?" "You are property." Before Jace could aim his rifle, Rhodes raised his hand. The 4 bots moved at once, firing stun blasts toward the tunnel. Jace shoved Riven down as blue sparks lit the stone walls. They rolled behind cover, breathless, heart pounding. "We can't win this fight," Riven whispered. "Not here." Jace looked around desperately. Then he spotted a small shaft to their right, narrow, but just wide enough. "Crawl space," he said. "Move now." They scrambled inside. Just as more shots fired, the tunnel behind them exploded in sparks and dust. They crawled for what felt like forever. The sound of pursuit growing distant. When they finally emerged, they were deep inside an old engine room. A massive power core flickered in the center, long dead but not broken. Riven touched the side, and the lights blinked to life. The hum of forgotten energy filled the room. Jace turned to her, breathing hard. "What now?" She stared at the core, her eyes glowing again. "Now I wake up what they were so afraid of," she said, "and I show them why I don't need protection." Jace swallowed hard. Something in the room had shifted, as if the core recognized her. Touch, and suddenly he wasn't sure if the biggest threat to the Syndicate was behind him or beside him. The lights inside the engine room flickered like they were remembering how to breathe. Dust floated in the air, glowing softly with each pulse from the core. Jace stepped back slowly, watching Riven as she stood in front of the ancient machine. She wasn't scared anymore. She looked like she belonged there. He felt something strange rise inside him. Not fear exactly, but the feeling that she wasn't just some runaway alien girl. She was connected to this place, to something older, something powerful. And now that power was waking up. Riven placed both hands on the core's surface. It responded like it was alive, humming louder. Blue light wrapping around her arms. Symbols began appearing in the air, glowing letters that floated and spun. They weren't in human language, but Jace could almost feel what they meant. "Are you sure this is safe?" he asked quietly. Riven didn't answer. Her eyes were closed, her body tense. Then, suddenly, a loud pulse shot through the room, like a heartbeat made of thunder. The walls shook, and a shockwave spread out in every direction. Far away, outside the ruins, machines paused. A red alarm blinked in their cores, and they all turned as one toward the signal in the engine room. Riven collapsed to her knees. Gasping, Jace rushed to her side, grabbing her shoulders. "What did you do?" he asked. "I opened the system," she whispered, "only partially, but enough to make them panic." Jace looked at the console. It was lit up now, showing maps, coordinates, and something worse. Multiple units had been activated, drone armies buried in long-lost facilities. "You woke everything." He said I had to, Riven replied. "They would have never stopped chasing me. This way, I choose the battlefield." Before Jace could say more, the room's coms crackled to life. A voice came through, deep, calm, familiar. "Riven," it said, "you've chosen war, but it will break you." It was Rhodes. Jace grabbed the transmitter and shouted, "She's not alone." There was a pause. Then the voice came again. "You were always too loyal, Carter," Rhodes said. "Let's see how far that loyalty goes." The signal ended, and outside, the sounds of engines and metal footsteps grew louder. The Syndicate was coming, with real force this time. Not to capture, but to destroy. Riven stood again, breathing hard. She pulled a small disc from her belt and tossed it toward the core. It locked into place, and the humming became deeper. "What's that?" Jace asked. "A trigger," she said, "for the second wave." Before Jace could ask what that meant, the wall beside them exploded. 3 black-armored soldiers stepped through. Weapons drawn, Jace fired instantly, hitting one in the shoulder. And forcing them back, Riven rushed forward and knocked another to the ground with a blast of energy from her palm. They escaped through a side door as alarms screamed around them. The corridor shook under their feet. Lights above burst one by one as power surged through ancient wires. They ran, turning corner after corner, till they found an old lift. Jace slammed the button, and the platform began rising slowly from below. Shouts and metal footsteps echoed up the shaft. "They're faster now," he said, reloading. "They're scared," Riven answered. "They know what I've become." Jace looked at her carefully. "You still haven't told me what that is?" She looked at him, eyes glowing again. "I am the last memory of a dead empire," she said. "And now?" "I'm awake." The lift reached the surface, opening into a crater surrounded by ruins. Wind howled across the rocks, and black clouds formed overhead in the distance. Hundreds of red lights moved in a perfect line. The Syndicate's army, Jace, gritted his teeth. "No way we can fight all of them," he said. Riven stepped forward, holding her hand out toward the sky. A strange sound came, not from her voice, but from the air itself, like the planet was answering her call. From the other side of the crater, tall figures began rising from the ground. They weren't human, and they weren't machines. Old guardians shaped like stone and metal, with glowing cores in their chests. They had slept for centuries. But now they stood again. Riven turned back to Jace and said something he didn't expect. "Thank you," she whispered, "for not running away." He gave a small nod, unsure if he was proud or just terrified. She smiled, then looked back at the army marching toward them. And when the first laser fired, she didn't dodge. She walked into the light like it belonged to her. The sky cracked open, not with thunder, but with the roar of old gods waking from sleep. Riven stood at the edge of the crater, her silver hair whipping in the wind, eyes glowing bright like twin stars. Jace was behind her, his weapon raised, heart pounding not from fear of the enemy, but from what she had become. The Syndicate's army was moving in perfect formation, a sea of metal and fire stretching across the horizon, but they didn't stop. Not even when the stone guardians rose from the earth. One of the machines stepped forward, a giant walker with 6 legs and a cannon as big as a tank. It scanned Riven, then broadcast a cold message. "Surrender the girl, and you may live." Riven didn't answer. She raised her hand, and the guardians behind her did the same. Without a single word spoken, energy rippled from her skin like a wave. The ground split, and massive roots shot up, wrapping around Syndicate drones and crushing them like toys. The battlefield became a storm of power, ancient nature, and forgotten tech clashing like titans. Jace had seen war before, but nothing like this. He shot at the enemy when they got close, but most of the fight wasn't his to win. It was hers every time she moved. The jungle reacted, the wind followed her, and the earth obeyed, and yet, for all her strength, there was pain in her eyes. "You okay?" he yelled as 2 drones exploded nearby. She turned briefly, blood on her lip, but nodded. "I'm still holding," she said. Then the voice of Rhodes cut through the battle again. "You're strong, Riven, but not invincible." A black aircraft descended from above, its engines whining like dying animals. From it, Rhodes dropped to the ground in his dark armor, holding a weapon unlike any Jace had seen. It pulsed with red light aimed directly at Riven. She didn't flinch. Rhodes smiled coldly. "This device erases memory, not yours, but the memory inside you. Let's see who you are without it," he fired. The beam hit her square in the chest. She screamed and dropped to her knees, the light in her eyes flickering. Jace ran toward her, heart racing, firing at Rhodes with everything he had, but the shots bounced off the armor. The Syndicate commander walked toward Riven slowly. "You were never meant to carry this burden," he said. "You were supposed to be a warning, not a weapon." Suddenly, a loud crack echoed across the crater. One of the stone guardians punched through Rhodes's aircraft, which exploded behind him. He turned, distracted for a second. That was enough. Riven stood again, her voice low, filled with rage and sorrow. "You want the memory gone," she said. "Then take it. She placed her palm on his chest, and her eyes flared with one final surge of power. The ground lit up with symbols, the sky pulsed, and time itself seemed to slow. Jace watched as Rhodes froze in place. Then the armor around him shattered, and his body dropped silently to the ground. Whatever weapon he had used had failed or backfired. Riven fell backward, exhausted, caught by Jace just in time. The rest of the Syndicate army paused, then shut down, as if something had pulled their purpose away. Without Rhodes, they were just machines. Lifeless, directionless, done. The crater was silent again. Except for the hum of the Guardians returning to sleep, Jace held Riven close, her breathing slow. "But steady, you did it," he whispered. "It's over." She opened her eyes weakly and smiled. "I told you I didn't need protection," she said. Then, with a weak laugh, she added, "But I'm glad you came anyway." Later, as the smoke cleared, Jace helped her climb onto his back. She clung to him, not out of fear this time, but because they were a team now, wherever they went next, it would be together. And high above, the sky slowly turned blue again for the first time in years.